I mean, it feels like a physical game every game. Feels like it's been a physical season. But yes, I think, I feel like I've been on the ground a little bit more this series so far. But we just keep getting back up, so that's all you can really say.
If you're wondering why Caitlin Clark is furious heading into Game 3 of the WNBA semifinals, it's because the Indiana Fever didn't just lose Game 2, they had it ripped right out of their hands. This wasn't a story about being outplayed, and it definitely wasn't about a lack of talent. No, this was a story about how the officials practically delivered a win to the Las Vegas Aces on a silver platter, and in doing so created a credibility crisis the league can no longer ignore.
Watch how the third quarter goes down. At least they called this one. A'ja Wilson creams Lexie Hull like she did 5 times in game 1. Peggy Hammock get 15 calls in a row and one goes another way and she starts screaming and crying. A'ja Wilson doesn't like Lexie Hull. She's always pushing her, but that's an illegal screen, and then Lexie Hull gets called for a foul.
To understand the robbery that was Game 2, you have to first understand the masterpiece that was Game 1. That wasn't just a win for the Fever, it was a statement. Indiana walked into the fortress of the 2-time defending champions and systematically dismantled them with suffocating discipline. Kelsey Mitchell locked in from the opening tip, put on the game of her life, pouring in 34 points and proving she could own the spotlight against the league's very best. The Fever moved the ball, controlled the tempo, and completely shut down the Aces' attempts to play their signature fast and flashy style. It was calm, composed, championship-level basketball, and it worked to perfection.
A'ja Wilson's just a big bully. Look at this. Throws Lexie Hull on the ground. Everything she does is illegal. Look at this one. A moving screen and then pushes Lexie Hull. You think they ever call a foul on A'ja Wilson?
And A'ja Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces lose Game 1 on their home court to the Indiana Fever, 89-73. The Indiana Fever were in control of this game from start to finish.
The most damning part of that Game 1 victory was what Indiana did to A'ja Wilson. On the very night she was being celebrated as the league MVP, she turned in one of her worst shooting performances of the entire season, channeling her inner Angel Reese. She finished with just 6 makes on a staggering 22 attempts, grabbing multiple rebounds to pad her stats. Indiana's game plan was brilliant. They swarmed her, forced her into uncomfortable spots on the floor, and never allowed her to find a rhythm. She had absolutely no answers. The result was a 16-point blowout that sent shockwaves across the WNBA. The Fever had sent their message. They weren't just happy to be here, they were ready to compete for a title.
In the WNBA, you cannot blindside somebody and set a screen on them without enough time for letting the player being screened react. And then look at this. This one, their arms lock up, but you gotta let go at some point. Like, you can't bring the person closer to you and just stay locked in while the offensive player is trying to get the rebound. But we know A'ja Wilson only receives fouls.
But you could already feel what was coming next. The league's golden franchise had been embarrassed on their home floor. They had been punched in the mouth, and payback was inevitable. So when Game 2 arrived, the Aces didn't just want to win. They wanted to send a message back. From the opening minutes, they abandoned basketball for brute force. It was a storm of forearms, shoulders, and collisions on nearly every single possession. The referees let it all slide, hiding behind the excuse of playoff physicality. But when you stack up 41 total fouls, with 16 in just one quarter, that's not intensity, that's chaos.
Steph, why don't you think you were able to find any flow, and when that was the case, what are you trying to do to jumpstart things, maybe on the defense?
Well, it's hard for us to find flow when there's a foul call every 10 seconds. I mean, it just really is. And when they're at the free throw line, we can't get up and down the floor. And that's a challenge. They were much more aggressive and physical defensively. We didn't counter that with our off-ball actions or with our back cuts. So they took us out of our comfort zone. I mean, offense is about rhythm, it's about timing, it's about spacing. We allowed them to do that, and they kept us from doing it.
The Fever never stood a chance to find their rhythm. A team built to run and create flow was forced into broken, ugly half-court sets, the exact opposite of their identity. Every trip down the floor was chopped to pieces by a whistle. And while Indiana stumbled through stop and start possessions, Las Vegas practically lived at the free throw line. This wasn't a basketball game, it was a mud fight Indiana never signed up for.
Yeah, Lexie, obviously you were a late add to the injury report today. Just how are you feeling this morning with your back, and what do you have to do to be able to play? I mean, I'm feeling sore still, but I think just a lot of treatment, trying to get, our bodies as ready as we can be. Part of playoffs, I think, for everyone is it's the end of the season. Everyone's a little fatigued, everyone's a little sore. So just trying to go out there and do the best I can. Yeah, a lot of treatment with our trainers. I'm really thankful for them to spend a lot of time with me today, a lot of time with me yesterday, getting me ready for tonight.
No one embodied this battle more than Lexie Hull. She shouldn't even have been out there. Her back was already banged up from game 1, and most players would have sat. But Hull strapped.
No one embodied this battle more than Lexie Hull. She shouldn't have even been out there. Her back was already banged up from game 1, and most players would have sat. But Hull strapped in and fought. And how did the Aces respond? They targeted her. On every cut, every defensive rotation, every box out, there was extra contact, an extra shove. She hit the deck more times than anyone should in a single game, but she refused to fold. Instead, she went to the perimeter and buried 5 three-pointers, tying the Fever's franchise playoff record. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, it was pure, simple defiance.
This is what happened. They cut it to 8 and they get 4 fouls in a row. That was not a foul. That was not a foul. This is crazy. 4 consecutive fouls. So from 8, it goes to 13 really quick, and the rest was history. It looks like Howard got hit in the arm by 2 players. They don't call foul. It was a shot clock. But the rest of the game were just a whole bunch of fouls being called, people flying.
And yet, after all that, the headline celebrated A'ja Wilson's bounce-back game. 25 points, 9 boards, 5 steals, 2 blocks, a box score glow-up. But what those numbers don't show is how she got them. Wilson didn't win this game on skill alone. She bulldozed her way into the paint, initiated contact, and got whistles that Indiana never saw at the other end of the floor. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Boston was living that tilt firsthand. Her 13 rebounds and 10 points look respectable on paper, but they don't tell the story of the constant elbows, the shoves, and the endless no-calls. Every board she grabbed was a war. Every shot she took was contested with more body than ball. This is a third-year player being treated like a crash test dummy, and she just kept competing.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you look at it. It looks, honestly, by some of the fouls and the way it was going, it looks like we were almost too physical, but yet at the same time, I feel like we have to be able to get that on the other end. I think, sometimes when you just look at the game as a whole, when you look at the way that it works, sometimes you manipulate it into different ways and you have smaller matchups. So, I mean, I just don't think it's really possible all the time for some of those smaller matchups to really do such a clean job of that. But hey, I'm here to hoop, so none of my business.
The real tactical story, beyond the whistles, was how the Aces neutralized Kelsey Mitchell. After she exploded for 34 in Game 1, Vegas made a decision they were going to cut off her air supply and force anyone else to beat them. Even when Mitchell didn't have the ball, defenders were face guarding her like she was the only person on the floor. Every screen set for her was blown up by a hard hedge or an outright collision. By the time she found any daylight, the shot clock was bleeding away. The difference wasn't skill, it was pure physical denial. What's wild is that even Becky Hammon, Vegas's coach, admitted afterward she wasn't thrilled with how rough the game had become. Imagine that. Her own team benefited from the chaos, and yet she still called it out. That detail proves what everyone watching already knew. The outcome wasn't built on smart adjustments alone. It was shaped by officiating that rewarded hyper-physicality.
Hull kept her out of that space as much as she would have wanted to. She did end up with 19 turns.
7-0. Aces run has been stopped. Sims in.
Step on that note with Kelsey just having a little bit of a, they were able to contain her a little bit more. How did you feel like they were able to be successful in that regard?
I mean, the physicality won. She's like a little pinball. I know that the museum's right down the street, so sometimes I feel like she's getting pinged around everywhere.
But here's what everyone should be asking now. If Vegas needed both the officials and dirty play to barely scrape out a win at home, what happens when this series shifts to Indiana? What happens when the Fever return to Gainbridge Fieldhouse with their crowd behind them, burning with anger over how Game 2 unfolded? The chessboard is about to flip. The next 2 games are in Indianapolis, where 17,000 fans are waiting to unleash the kind of energy that changes a series. Gainbridge Fieldhouse isn't just a court, it's an amplifier. Every run feels bigger, every whistle gets magnified, every defensive stand feeds into a wave of noise that rattles even the most experienced teams.
The physicality is out of control, that's for sure. I mean, you can bump and grab a wide receiver in the NFL for those first 5 yards, but you can do it in the W for the whole half court. You put 2 hands on somebody like that, it should be an automatic foul. They have the freedom of movement. Freedom of movement. There's no freedom. And I'm not saying that we're not fouling too. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's out of control.
Officiating bias thrives in silence. When Aliyah Boston gets shoved in the back in Vegas, the game moves on. In Indy, 17,000 people erupting will force the referees to acknowledge it. When Lexie Hull gets knocked to the floor on a cut, the crowd will demand accountability. Home court isn't just about friendly rims, it's about collective pressure on every single decision. For the Fever, that noise is pure fuel. Hull, taped up and battling through pain, has already proven she won't quit. Boston's work in the trenches only grows sharper with the fans lifting her energy, and Kelsey Mitchell, who had her worst playoff night in years, now walks into a building that chants her name before she even takes a shot. Her frustration is about to transform into scoring fireworks.
If I could just ask you to look forward to the series going to your home court in Indianapolis, how much is that really going to make a difference in this series, and how much does it mean to you guys to have that home court advantage?
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. Our fans, they show up and they show out, and so for us just, using that, our own energy, but also using the energy in the crowd, I think it's going to be really great for us.
Yeah, we're excited. I know the last time it was the first playoff game in a really long time, so to be able to have 2 more for our fans that have been there with us all season, I'm really excited for that, and we definitely do feed off of their energy, so we're really looking forward to it.
This is why these next 2 games are more than just a continuation of the series. They're a referendum. Can the Fever take all the fouls, the bruises, and the no calls and turn it into power? Can they feed off the injustice of Game 2 and flip it into energy that fuels a knockout punch? Every sign points to yes. Vegas may have celebrated their adjustments, but the reality is simple. Indiana didn't break. They absorbed it. They learned. And now they return to their house, with all the momentum waiting to be reclaimed. Game 3 at Gainbridge isn't just another stop, it's the pivot point where this series will be decided. The Fever aren't coming home to survive, they're coming home to put the aces on the ropes, with the crowd as their weapon and revenge as their fuel. If you believe in Indiana's fire, drop a Let's Go Fever in the comments, like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.